Hey guys, my name is Bunn, and I'm a training content creator or technical writer here at Epic Games. And today we're going to be talking about UMG and more specifically drag and drop functionality in UMG. So I know you guys probably have a lot of questions. We have a lot to cover in this training series here. This series may get, I guess it's not a series, this video may get split up into a series. We may need to break this up into two parts because it's going to be a lot we're going to cover here. We're going to start working on an inventory system, essentially inventory 2.0. If you guys are familiar with UMG at all and have participated in the inventory with UMG that's on the marketplace right now. If you've done that, this is kind of an extension of this. So this stream kind of assumes the knowledge that you have a base level understanding of UMG and blueprints. And again, this stream will be posted so you can come back and review later if you need to. So what we want to do here is actually jump right into the project that we're going to be doing. So we can hop to the screen here so we can see what we got going on. Again, probably I would say maybe 30 minutes into this, we'll take a break for questions and see how we're doing on time if we need to extend this into another training stream as well. But I kind of want to show you what we have here. So again, if you guys have done the inventory with UMG, this should look somewhat familiar here. So I'm going to play in the editor here, and here's what we have. So we have our inventory system. We have the little pickups that you can go and pick up in your level. So I can pick one up and pick another one up. And if I press I, it brings up our inventory menu. And it's very similar to what we did before. However, in this instance in inventory 2.0 here, we now have the ability to drag items from our inventory menu, drag and drop them down to our action bar. So that's what we're going to set up here today. We're going to try to get through this whole process together here. We also have the ability, and this is not just for inventories, if you have a customizable UI that you want, like if you wanted to move your inventory menus around or your action bar or any kind of UI element that you want to allow to be customizable by your users, you can also use the drag and drop functionality for this. So we're going to set this up here together and mostly focus on this action bar, getting this action bar working in drag and drop. And then based on time, we'll continue with our inventory menu here. So the inventory menu is pretty straightforward. We do have the ability to, like I mentioned, drag things to the bar. We can swap things in our inventory. You can move things anywhere we want inside the inventory menu. If we press a button, it will remove it from our action bar and remove it from our inventory. So getting all this logic set up is I don't want to say tricky, but it requires a little bit of thought put into it, how you're going to set it up. So based on time, we'll see if we can get to that. So I'm going to actually minimize this project really quickly, and we're going to start from a brand new project, kind of walk through this together. If you want to take the time to create a brand new project and follow along, feel free. So we're on the Unreal Project Browser tab here, and we're going to use the first person template. And I'm just going to give it a new name. We're just going to call it New Project, if I can see it, like so. So let's call it New Project, that's fine. And let's create our project. So it's going to take just a second for it to load up. And once it's on screen, we'll probably do some of the prep work. We'll get some of the items that we need to use later on out of the way. So we'll create all of those first and foremost, and then populate them as we need to as we go along. So once your project is open, let's go ahead and go into the first person BP folder and into the blueprints folder. And inside this, we're going to create a brand new folder to hold all of our UMG widgets. So we're going to right click and brand new folder. And we're just going to call this the UI folder, like so. And I'm going to open it up. And inside of this, let's start creating some of the widgets that we'll need. So the first one that we're going to need, if we right click and go under user interface and widget blueprint, first one that we're going to need is our action bar. So we're just going to call this action bar. So that's going to be the bar that you saw across the bottom of the screen. Going to select it and hit Control W to duplicate it so that we have another widget blueprint. We're going to now call this one action slot. And this is the individual slot inside of our action bar. So we need to have individual versions, individual buttons inside of our action bar. So that's our action slot. Gonna select it and hit Control W again to create another widget blueprint. This one's gonna be called inventory. So this is gonna be our main inventory menu. Gonna select it and hit Control W and inventory slot. So similar to the action bar, this is the individual slot inside of our inventory. We're going to do one more here. Let's do another one, Control W. This is going to be called HUD. Now, reason we did this is we have our main HUD, which will have both our action bar and both our inventory menu on that main HUD. So this is the main game HUD that we're going to be using for our player character. The next one that we need to create, if we hit Control W one more time, this is going to be called dragged item. And this is the item that is created when you do your drag and drop functionality. So whenever you do a drag and drop, it's going to dump it into this particular widget, the visual. So that is what we will see when we are dragging our items in game here. And while we're at it, speaking of drag and drop, there's two specific blueprints that you can use. Again, if you are new to drag and drop functionality, which I'm going to assume you are, you can use blueprint classes. There's a blueprint class called the drag and drop class, and you can use that to populate your drag and drop with whatever information you need. If you have widgets or any kind of variables or anything that you want to pass through as part of the drag and drop operation, you can use a blueprint for that. So we're going to right click and we're going to create a brand new blueprint class. And down under all classes here, let's expand this and let's search for drag drop. So there's our drag drop operation right there. So go ahead and select that. That's the class that we want to use. So, and we're going to call this first drag and drop operation item drag. And then we're going to use this for whenever we're dragging items from the inventory or from our action menu. We need to duplicate this. We need to create one more drag and drop operation. So I'm going to hit Control W, duplicate it. And we're going to call this one widget drag. And this is going to be the action bar if we're ever dragging the action bar or the inventory menu around. We're going to use this drag and drop operation. So with both of those, let's actually just take the time really quick to kind of populate those with the information that we'll need. So let's start with the item drag. So I'm going to double click and open that up. And what we're going to do inside here is just add some variables, the variables that we want to pass along as part of our drag and drop operation. So I'm going to go over to My Blueprint panel, click the Add Variable button. And the first one that we're going to create, we'll call this first one up here Slot Index. And this will let us know its position within either the inventory menu or the action bar that we are actually performing the drag and drop operation on. So we actually need to change this to an integer. So let's go to the variable type, change it to an integer, like so. And I'm also going to make it editable and expose it on spawn. And while I'm at it, I'm going to grab this details panel, just because I prefer to work in this manner, and drag it all the way down to the lower left and dock it to the My Blueprint panel, just so it makes it easier to get to the details panel and modify properties. So there's 3 more variables that we need to create really quickly. So click the Add Variable button. Next one we're going to create is called Item Image. This will be the image that we are passing through as part of our drag and drop. And we need to change this to a texture 2D. So let's change this. So search for texture 2D. And again, we're going to make this editable and expose it on spawn. And then the last 2 we need to create. One more here. Let's create this one. This is going to be called From Inventory. We need to know if we are taking this item as part of the drag and drop, if we are dragging it from the inventory menu or if we are dragging it from the action menu, because we're going to do different things based on where we're dragging it from. So we need to change this to a Boolean actually. So let's make sure that that's a Boolean. And then the last one that we need to create, let's just create one more. And this is going to be called dragged item. And the dragged item is an actual object. This is the object inside of our inventory that we are dragging. So we're going to change this to an object type. Like so. And let's make this editable and expose it. So both of those are checked. From inventory, let's expose those 2 as well. I just noticed I didn't do that. So let's make this editable and expose that as well. All of our variables should be editable and publicly exposed so that when we spawn this or call this, we can modify those properties then. So let's compile and save, and then close this blueprint. And then we'll modify the widget drag version of it. And it's similar, but a little bit smaller on the variables that we need to create. So let's open it up in the full editor. And the variables that we need to create, let me just make sure I have my notes together. First one that we need to create, so let's click the Add Variable button. Let's just call this widget to drag. What widget are we actually dragging? We need to know what it is. So we're going to make this a user widget. So down in the variable type, user widget, like so. And we're going to make that editable and expose it on spawn. And then one more variable that we need to create here. one more variable. We'll call this the drop window offset. And I'll explain a little bit more what this will do for us when we get to our actual drag and drop operation. We're going to change the variable type though. We're going to change this to a vector 2D. Really quickly, what this will do is give us a way to offset where we are dragging, wherever we mouse click and start to drag our widget. We want to have an offset so that it appears precisely where we clicked our mouse and doesn't jump to a different location. So if you've experimented with drag and drop before and you are wondering why your widgets would pop to different locations, you may have needed to add an offset and populated that offset from your mouse click. And we'll walk through it a little bit more once we get to that part. So let's make this editable and expose it on spawn, and we are done with this as well. Close that. And let me take a quick look at our questions really quickly. So we have 2 questions so far. I kind of want to get to our first portion of dragging and dropping before we jump more into questions. I was trying to see if there's any questions related to what we got going on right now. So can we customize our inventory system, adding more slots? Yes, we can do that. I'll show you once we get through the whole process how you can just add more slots really quickly because the previous version of the inventory system that I created was my first take on it, and I had some time to kind of experiment with it and working with our engineers here to kind of learn best practices. Doing it this way will allow you to easily do that, and I'll show you how you can do that. And then it says, when are we getting easily stylized combo boxes for UMG? That's an excellent question that may need to be directed to Answer Hub so that some of our engineers can jump on and give a better response to that, as I may not have the right answer for that. I don't want to give you false information. So another question, with drag and drop, can you customize the size of the image that is displayed when dragging, or is it forced? No, you can totally customize the size of the widget that you are dragging. You can pass that through as well. We're going to get to that here in a moment as well. So let's continue actually, so we can get our first bit of drag and drop going on. So we finished up the widget drag and the item drag. Let's see, what are we going to do next? Let's go back to our blueprints folder, and inside of our blueprints folder, we need to create a controller blueprint. So let's right click and let's create a new blueprint class. And player controller is the blueprint parent class that we want. And we're just going to call it my player character, like so. And again, in the previous version of this video, or this series, the inventory series, I had mentioned that you would probably want to store your information for your inventory inside of the player controller. Did I do a character, actually? I just noticed that. No, I did do a controller. I just named it character. Let's rename this. My player controller, just to add a little bit more clarity. I mentioned in the previous video that you would probably want to store your information for your inventory inside of your player controller. That way, if your character dies, anything that's with your character will get wiped, but your player controller would be persistent. So all of your inventory items, if you wanted to do it that way, could remain inside of your player controller. And then when you spawn a new character in and possess it, you would still have access to all those inventory items. In the inventory project that's on Marketplace right now, for a first pass, we stored it inside of our HUD just because it was easy access. And I did mention there that you would probably want to store it inside of your player controller, which is why we're now doing it this way, the better way of doing it. So inside of our player controller here, we've created our player controller. Let's go ahead and open that up. And we're going to open that in the full blueprint editor there. And let's get our notes together. So let's go to the player controller. And we're not going to do too much in here just yet. Let's see. Let's go to the graph here, and we're going to start with the event begin play. So let's kill this event tick. We don't need that. So on our event begin play here, all we're going to do is right click and get player character. Oops. So we get our player character. If I could type, there it is. And we want to cast to our first person character so that we can access the properties inside it. So we're going to cast to first person character there, like so. We're going to connect our event begin play. And all we're going to do is store a reference to our character, our playable character, so that we can access it later. So we're just going to right click on this pin, promote it to a variable, and call it character reference, like so. That's all I wanted to do for that. And then we do need to create some variables that we need to access a little bit later. So we're going to get those out of the way, actually. So let's create a couple more variables here. So we're going to click the Add Variable button. First one's going to be called empty slot. And this is going to be used to determine if we have a position inside of our inventory that is empty. In the previous version of this system, we were adding things to the inventory sequentially. So you couldn't move things around inside the inventory, and that was a little bit not the way I kind of wanted to do it, or the way we should do it. We want to be able to allow the user to move things around inside their inventory. And doing it this way, we need to find a spot inside of our inventory that is empty. So we're going to use this to find that empty slot, or hold that empty slot for us. So we do need to change this to a variable type. We need to change this to an integer. So make it an integer, like so. And let's create a couple more variables here. Add a variable. This is going to be has inventory space with a question mark. We're going to use this to determine if the player does indeed have an empty slot inside of their inventory. So we're going to change this to a Boolean, like so. And we're going to create one more in here. So we're going to add one more variable. This is going to be called inventory objects. So inventory objects. And this is going to be our actual inventory, our quote-unquote bag. Everything that we pick up is going to be collected inside of here. So let's change this to an object type. And we also need to make sure that it's an array. And if we compile, over in the default value, this hops back to that question a moment ago. Can we customize and we're adding more slots? This is where you would do that. This is where you would add those additional slots. So right now we're going to start out with 5. So we're just adding 5 empty slots. So it's 0 base. So we're starting at 0 and we have 5. If you wanted to add additional slots, this would be the place that you would do it. Inside of your inventory objects variable here, you would just click the plus sign to represent the number of quote unquote bag slots that you would have. For our purposes, we're going to start out with 5. I think that's good. So let's continue. Let's compile actually and save. So I'm going to compile and save. And I think that's good for now. We're going to have to come back to this in a moment. So I'm just going to undock it and just dock it up there for now. The next thing that we're going to do, because it's really quick and easy, let's go back into our UI folder. Let's open up our dragged item widget blueprint. And again, this is the widget that is the representation of whatever it is we drag. So let's go ahead and open that up because it's really quick to do this one. So let's get my notes together again. Let's see. Okay, so down in the hierarchy, this is just a matter of preference depending on how you like to work. Typically, once you get more familiar with UMG, it's probably quicker to just drag all the elements that you need into your hierarchy, and then once you have your interface populated with the content, then manipulating it and adjusting it inside of the visual designer and setting its properties in the details panel. So we're going to be working inside the hierarchy here. So all I'm going to do is, first of all, kill our canvas panel. We do not need a canvas panel, so I'm going to delete that. What we do need is a size box. So I'm going to go under panel here, and I'm going to grab a size box. So I'm going to left click, drag and drop that on top of our dragged item there. Then we're going to grab a border under common, just left click, and drag that into our size box. And then on top of our border, we're going to use an image. So let's grab an image and drag that on top of our border. So this kind of gets back to the question about can you resize the size of the image when it is dragged? You can do that right here with this size box, actually. You can specify the width. You can override the width and the height. So we're actually going to do that. So I'm going to click this checkbox here and this checkbox here so that we override and manually enter the size that we want this to appear. We can actually visually see what it's going to look like too if we click the drop down here for fill screen. Let's actually use desired on screen. So right now it's at 0, 0, so it's not showing anything. But we're going to change these actually. We're going to change this to 64 by 64. And you can use any values that you want. You can make this bigger or smaller, depending on your needs. I just experimented with playing around with some values, and this is what I was content with. So we're going to just set it to 64 by 64, like so. And then we do want to make some quick adjustments to our border. So let's grab our border. And we do want to change the color that is currently being used. So we're going to go over to the details panel. Let's click this. And we're going to change this color actually. Let's see, what do we want to change this to? Let's change it to a darkish color, something like this. And our alpha, we're going to bump this down a little bit. We'll bump that down to 0.25. Feel free to use any kind of border color that you want representing the item when you're dragging it. This is what we're going to use though. And for quick reference, also what we're going to do, I'm going to take our color here and just drag it up to the color picker so that I have reference to this exact color. Because we're going to use this for our action background border, our action bar. We're going to use that as the background as well as our inventory. So I'm just going to take it up there so that we can reference the exact same color later, just so we have some consistency. So with that, I'm going to hit OK, have it applied. And our image, we do need to set one property on our image here. So let's go to our image. And we're going to bind the brush property here. We need to bind this image because it's going to be a variable. It's not always going to be the same thing. So we're going to have to create a variable for this. So I'm going to hop over to the graph tab really quickly, top up here. So I'll click the graph tab. And we're going to create a brand new variable. And it's just going to be called the dragged image, like so. And we're going to change it to a texture 2D. So texture 2D, like so. And let's just make it editable and expose it on spawn just in case we need it later. So with that, let's compile and then hop back to the designer tab and assign that property. So our brush, we are now assigning it to this property. So if you're slightly new to UMG, what we've done here is bound whatever image we want to appear on our drag as we're dragging it across. This is now going to be a variable that we can populate, and we can drive that with this property here that we've just created. So make sure that we bind it like so. And then let's compile and save. And I think that's all we need to do for our dragged item image. Let's see if there's any questions. So one quick question here for a third-person game. Do we have to use a cast to third-person character? It will be the same process on two projects. Yes, if you want to take this, what we're doing here today, we're doing it in the first-person blueprint. If you are doing for the third-person character, you would cast to the third-person character. Everything else would be the same, but because you're using the third-person character blueprint, you would need to cast to that. So yes. So back in our project, our drag item is created. So let's go ahead and close that. And let's actually go back to our main project here. And the next thing that we want to do, let's start working on the action slot and the action bar. What we'd like to do is get to the point where we can drag our action bar around just so you can see the process of dragging and dropping. So to actually have our action bar, we need to populate it with our action slot. So we're going to build that first. So let's go ahead and open up our action slot widget blueprint. So with that open, again on the designer tab, let's make some quick adjustments to this. In the hierarchy, we're going to kill the canvas panel because we don't need absolute layout. So I'm going to kill that. All we need for this is a button, a size box, and an image. So let's grab our button, drag that onto our action slot like so. And let's grab a size box. Drag that onto our button, and then let's take an image and drag that into our size box. So now that we have those set up, let's actually click on our button here. There's one very important thing about drag and drop, specifically with buttons. If we scroll down to the bottom of the details panel here, there's a section for interaction. And if you've set up drag and drop in the past and you weren't quite sure why you're clicking on something and it's not actually performing the drag and drop operation, you may need to come down and look at your interaction. By default, the click method is set to down and up. If I mouse over here, you can kind of get a quick description of what the tooltip says. This is the most common type. For our purposes though, because we're doing drag and drops with buttons, we need to click this drop down. And if we scroll down, there's a precise click option. And if you see towards the end of this description here, it says moving the pointer will scroll the list. Also allows drag and droppable buttons. So this is the one that we want. You need to make sure that your button is set to precise click. And if you're doing a touch game and you want drag and drop for touch, you would also set this to precise tap. We're not going to be getting into touch methods, but you could set that if you'd like. There's also an option for is focusable. It says sometimes a button should only be mouse clickable and never keyboard focused. If you're using gamepads and such, you can uncheck this. So we're going to uncheck that and leave it like that. So our button interaction is set up. We're going to scroll back up to the style section and stylize it real quickly here. So let's see. All we're going to do for our action slot buttons here, we're going to go down to the normal. And because we've set our tint color already before and we got reference to it, we're just going to assign these that same color. So go ahead and pick that same color. So by default, it'll appear kind of grayed out like so. And let's minimize that and go to hovered and set these all to that same color. Drag this in so you can see. And if you're looking for the exact colors, I'll leave that up for a second here. We're just using 0.14 for RGB, 0.25 for the alpha, like so. And then once we have it, click OK. So our button is stylized. Let's actually click this drop down here so we can see it a little bit better and use desired on screen. So let's go back to our size box now. Similar to what we did before, we're going to specify what it should be. So we'll get a consistent, our action buttons will be 64 by 64, our drag will be 64 by 64. So we're going to set our size box of our action buttons to 64 by 64 as well. So I'm going to click both of these and set this to 64 by 64, like so. And a compile. And I'm going to hop down to the image. And kind of like what we did before, we need to make this a property that is a variable essentially, because it can change whatever we have in our action bar. So for this, what we're going to do is a little bit different. We're going to go to the brush section and we're going to create a binding for this. So I'm going to click the under appearance here, create binding. And it's going to open up a graph for us. And on this graph, we're going to need to create a new variable. So create a variable. And this variable is going to be called the action image. And it's going to be of the texture 2D type. So texture 2D, like so. And I think we'll make it editable and expose it on Bunn just for the sake of doing it. So we have our action image here. I'm going to hold Control and drag it into our graph. And we're going to drag off of it. And we can't necessarily plug this straight in because it's asking for a brush. So we can't necessarily plug our 2D texture in. So I'm going to drag off of this and search for make brush from texture. That's going to convert our texture into a brush that we can then use. Now we don't need to worry about the width and the height because we've already specified that. So we can leave it just like this and we should be good. So let's make sure there's nothing else that we need to do. Let's see, on the designer tab, I think we're done on the designer tab. So let's compile and save, and let's hop to the event graph. So let's make sure I have that set up. And let's see. Get my notes. There we go. So we're going to have to create some variables for this and some functions for this. So let's start with the variables. So we'll create a brand new variable. This one's going to be called action slot. It's going to represent this particular action button inside of our action bar. So we need to specify, is it slot 1, slot 2, slot 3? We'll be able to define this here. So let's make this an integer. And we're going to make it editable and expose it on Spawn because we're going to set this in a moment here. So we have that. We need to create 3 variables for styling our button, and we'll explain why in a moment here. So let's create the first one here. The first one's going to be called enabled button style. And the variable type is going to be a button style. So this is a way that you can manually specify or override the style of your buttons through Blueprint script here. So we're going to make this a variable like so. And we're going to create 2 more of this same type. This next one's going to be called the drag over style. And 1 more. This one's going to be called the default button style. So we're going to use these to drive whenever the player is dragging an item over our action menu. So we have our action menu at the bottom of the screen. Player drags something from the inventory. When we drag it over each of our individual slots, we need to be able to tell those buttons to update their styling. And we're going to do that through these variables here. So on the event graph here, for the event construct, first thing we're going to do, right click and get player character. And we're going to drag off of this return value here and say cast to first person character. Like so. Now I just realized I don't think we've actually set up our first person character yet to display our HUD, so we may need to actually hop over to that and do this first. So let's actually do that. I should have did that first. So we're going to go back to the blueprints folder and open up our first person or third person character, depending on which character blueprint you're working with. So I'm going to open that up. And we're going to go up to the top, up here. And we need to create our main HUD widget and display that and create reference to it first. So let's go ahead and do that. So make sure I got everything we need. So we're going to right click on the graph, event begin play. So, and let's create widget. This is going to create our main HUD widget here. So for our class dropdown, let's change this to our HUD, so our main HUD. And we're going to promote the result of that to a variable. So right click, promote to variable. This is going to be called HUD reference. Like so. Once we've created a reference to it, we're then going to drag off and say add to viewport so that we display our HUD. So. And then we're also going to right click and get player controller. So we get our player controller and cast to my player controller so that we can access our inventory and stuff later if we need to, because it's inside of our my player controller blueprint. So let's connect all that like so. And we're just going to right click on this and promote this to a variable as well. And this is going to be called controller reference. So. So with that, let's compile and save. And now we can hop back to our action slot actually. And in our action slot, we need to get reference to our HUD. So let's drag off of this and say get HUD reference that we just created. And we'll promote this to a variable as well so that we can access it later. We'll call this HUD reference just for consistency. So, and let's make sure that we connect it. So our event construct is complete. We just needed to be able to get reference to our main game HUD. So that's why we did that there. We're going to be doing this quite a bit actually, and a little bit later we're actually going to make a macro that will help this process, and so we don't have to type this every time. But for now, I think that's good. So let's check if we have any questions so far. So for third-person game, oh, that was the same question. Just trying to glance over and make sure that our questions are caught up. Okay. On the event graph, what we're going to do, just to get it out of the way, we're going to set up our styling of our button here so that we don't have to do it later. So I'm going to delete this event tick. And we're going to use some custom events for this. We're going to use one custom event, and then there's two events that we can use for when we are dragging and dropping. There's an on event or event on drag enter and a event on drag leave. And we're going to use those to tell us when we've entered our action bar, when we're dragging into it, and when we leave it. So we're going to use those to change the styling of our buttons. So right click, and we're going to create a custom event. And this custom event is going to be called set default button, like so. And the first thing we're going to do is take our action image over here. We're going to hold control and drag that into the graph. And we're going to drag off of this and say is valid. So do we actually have a action image in this particular action slot? If we don't, then we don't want to allow the player to drag off of it because our action slot is empty and we want our button to be its default color. So we're going to branch here, hold B and create a branch and connect this to that like so. And then we're going to take our button that we created. So here's our button. Just going to control drag that in like so. And we're going to set style on that button. So we're going to drag off and set style. So, and off the true, we want to set this. So off the true. And if true, we're going to use the enabled button. So our button is enabled because we have something in it. So we want to use the enabled button style. So I'm just going to left click and drag and drop that on top, like so. And then we're going to do something similar for the false. So I'm just going to copy all of this except for the branch there and Control C and Control V to paste it. Then off of the false, we're going to connect that. Just going to move this over just a little bit. We don't want to reset this, so I'm going to delete that. So if we don't have something in there, we want to use our default button style. So I'm just going to left click, drag, then drop that on top, like so. Now we're going to use those event OnDrag and event OnDrag leave. So if you haven't used these before, you can get to them by right clicking and searching for event OnDrag enter. So event OnDrag enter for our drag and drop. Select that. That has some extra pins in here for my geometry, pointer event operation. We're going to touch on those in a moment here, but let's just finish this up really quickly so we can get into our actual drag and drop functionality. So what we're going to do is grab our button. So let's just grab our button again, getter, and set style. So when we are dragging into our action slot, we want the drag over style. So we're going to take this, left click, and drag that on. So it's kind of hidden behind the other node there. Let me see if I can move it. There we go. And then we're going to right click and we're going to say event OnDrag leave. So when I stop dragging an item over our action bar, all we're going to do for this actually is go back up to our widget style up here off the false. So off of our false, set it back to that default style. You could select all this, copy, and oops, not add a comment, but you could select it all and paste it and do it like this if you'd like. It's just up to you how you want to do it. But it's the same thing. We're just setting it back to its default grayed out style. So I'm just going to leave it like that actually for now. So we are done setting up the styling. Let's see, what do we want to do next? We're going to start working on, let's actually start working on the drag and drop operation stuff. So let's go to our functions, and at the very top under functions there's a little drop down for override. So if you click this drop down, it's going to give you a bunch of functions that come standard that you can override, as the name suggests. So we're going to override some of these. The first one that we're actually going to override, if we scroll down, there's an on mouse button down. So we're going to know when the mouse button is down. We want to start with that one. So we're going to on mouse button down, select that one. And then the other ones that we want to use, let's do it again, are overrides, the on drag detected. So when we've detected that a drag operation has been performed, it will call this function and then we can execute some script. So on drag detected is the next one that we want. Sequence like that. And then there's one more that we're going to add for the drop down, on drop. So whenever we drop the thing that we are dragging, what do we do? So our on drop. So with those three functions added over in the My Blueprint panel, they're kind of tucked away under these little categories which you can expand. We're going to start with the on mouse button down. So go ahead and double click on that, open that up. And it's going to give us two nodes there. And all we want to do for this, it's pretty short actually. If I mouse over these, so my geometry is the geometry of the widget receiving the event, and the mouse event is information about the input. We're not really going to worry about the my geometry for our mouse button down. All we really care about is the mouse event. So we're going to drag off of this, and we're going to search for detect drag if pressed. So when do we start detecting drag? So let's actually select this function. We can specify the key that we want to start detecting drag. So that's going to be our left mouse button. So I'm going to click this drop down and search for left mouse button. So I'm going to connect these up like so. And we need to make sure that our return value is plugged in. So let's do that. So, and let's actually hop over to our OnDrag detected now. So we're going to go over to our OnDrag detected here, or double click on it in the My Blueprint panel. Let's take our question. It says, questions say, will there be a font size anywhere soon for the combo box UMG component? Right now there's really not a way to do it. That is a question, another question probably for Answer Hub. I'm not quite sure the response for that. It says a user wants to know what we were making, maybe clarify the end goal. Again, if you're coming in a little bit late, this is what we're doing here. We're making a quick inventory system so that we can drag and drop customizable interfaces around. We can also pick up items, press I, and we can move them from our inventory into our action bar like so. So that's what we're doing. It says, can you programmatically drag items in press buttons for things like tutorials? Can you programmatically drag items in press buttons? Let's see. That would be a good question for our C++ guy. Oh, yeah. That actually is probably another good question for Answer Hub, one that I don't have the right answer to. Let's actually, I want to get back into our drag and drop operation here. So we were working on the drag detected here. We're almost ready to start testing the drag and drop functionality. There's a little bit more that we need to do. So let's continue inside of our action slot here. So on drag detected. So I'm going to move this node over just a little bit. So first thing we need to do is make sure that we have an item inside of our action bar. So we don't want to be able to drag empty slots around. So we need to make sure that there's actually an item there. So we can do that by getting our action image, just hold control and drag that in, drag off of it and say is valid. So it's going to give us that Boolean return value. I'm going to hold B to create a branch and left click. And give us branch. Let's connect this up like so. So before we do any kind of drag and drop operation, do we actually have something in that action slot? If we do, what we're going to do is right click and we're going to create our dragged item widget, that dummy widget that we created that gets populated with the item that we want to drag. So we're going to create a widget and it's going to be called dragged item. So our dragged item widget in our class here. And because we exposed that variable, we can specify what the image should be. So let's hook all this up. The image that it should be is our action image. We're just going to drag in another copy and plug that in. So. And now that we've actually created the draggable widget, we need to perform the drag and drop operation. So we're going to right click and say create drag and, well, just create drag and then you get one option. So create drag and drop operation. And this is the function that we want, or the event that we want. And we created our classes before. Again, if you have been working with drag and drop in the past, you may have been using the default drag and drop operation class, but we specified that you can create your own drag and drop operations, which we did. So for this one, we're actually going to be using the item drag because we're dragging items from our action bar. A little bit later, we'll do the widget drag, which once we get through this first one, we'll be able to get through the second one really quickly. So for this one, let's do item drag. And you'll see our little node here gets populated with all those variables that we exposed that we can then populate. Again, this is a method of passing whatever you want through the drag and drop operation by plugging those variables into your drag and drop operation. So let's continue. I'm going to connect our executable out here into our in. And before we forget anything, just going to connect our return value to our operation and our out like so. Now let's work on filling this out. Fortunately, it's going to be just 3 quick things. All we need to do is take our return value, the item that we are creating, the draggable widget. That's actually going to be, if I can grab the pin, that's actually going to be our default drag visual. So there's an option for default drag visual. Go ahead and drag and plug that down in here like so. So this is the what we are actually dragging around, and we're creating a widget that we want to drag around. So that's going to be our default drag visual. Now we do need to specify the image that gets populated in that. So we're going to take our action image and we're going to plug that into item image, like so. And then we also need to know from which slot on our action bar are we taking this from, because it could be any slot. It could be 1, it could be 5. So we need to specify that. So over in our My Blueprint panel, let's grab our action slot, go to left click, drag that, and plug that into our slot index. So. Now some other options in here. We don't need to worry about the offset just yet. In the next drag and drop operation that we will be working on, we will have to plug in an offset, but because we're creating a widget, and we've specified the size and everything. We don't need to specify our offset just yet, but we are going to change our pivot. And this determines where the object will be created. So right now it's set to center, center. We actually want to change this to mouse down. So wherever our mouse down is, that's where we're going to create that widget. Okay, so our OnDrag is finished. We can compile. And let's hop over. We're actually getting a note here. You may see this and wonder what this is. It's because we don't have anything plugged into our false. We could plug it into the return just to get rid of that note. So let's just go ahead and do that. Just compile. There goes our note. It doesn't hurt anything though. So let's see. Let's check out our onDrop. So let's check out our onDrop. So here's our onDrop. So when we are dropping something inside of this action slot, what do? That's what this portion of script is going to handle. So let's actually start by dragging off our operation here. So just going to left click and drag off that. We're going to say cast to item drag. So this is our drag and drop operation that we are casting to. And the reason we're casting to this is so that we can get all that information inside of it that we're going to need to pass along when we drop the item. So we're going to need to know where should we drop it, what's the image that we should drop on top of this, etc. So that's why we're casting to our item drag here. So let's make sure that we connect it. So move this over just a little bit more. And we're going to drag off our item drag here, and we're going to search for slot index. So get our slot index. And then we're going to drag off this again, and we're going to search for item image. So we're getting all those variables that we created inside of that item drag. And I'm going to drag off this one more time and say from inventory. So are we dragging from the inventory? No, we don't want to set it. We want to get it. Are we dragging something from the inventory into our action bar, or are we dragging from our action bar to another position on our action bar? So that's why we need to know what this is. We also need to get our action image here. So I'm going to hold Control and drag that in. I'm going to drag off of it now and say is valid, to make sure that it is making sure that it is an object in case we are dropping it on top of another action bar. Are we dropping it on top of another slot that has something in it, essentially? So that's what this is going to tell us. So with this, we need one more. We need to take our action slot, hold Control and drag that in as well. We need to get all this information. And then what we need to do, don't know if I want to get into this just yet. Let's actually hook up our item drag to our return node, and we're just going to click this. It has been handled for now, because we're going to come back to this and populate this. I want to actually get to the point where we're dragging our action bar. So we'll leave this here for now. We'll come back to this in a moment, because we're going to have to create a function for moving images, which I don't want to do just yet. So what we're going to do next is actually go to our action bar. So let's go back to the root here, and let's see if we have any questions. So with this system, the system could also build inventory at a fixed point on the scene, for example, in a box, a trunk, or a warehouse, rather than have it always available. For this question, this may be a follow-up question. Whoever posted this question may want to elaborate on a little bit more. Are you referring to something that you approach in world and then something pops up, and then that's where the inventory, I guess, pops up so that you can pull things out of that? I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to for this particular question. If it is, that is totally something you could do. You could use 3D widgets for that. You could use the other tutorial, which shows you how to populate things in screen space. So having something that always rotates or orientates towards the player character when they're in game. That tutorial will show you how to do that as well. So was it 2:50? So almost an hour in. So let's go ahead and continue inside of our project. Let's go to our UI folder, and let's open up our action bar. So now that we've created our action slot, we can actually populate our action bar. And then once we have our action bar, we can add it to our HUD. And then once we have our HUD, then we have something in game that we can play with. So let's go ahead and populate our action bar real quick. So I'm going to double click, open that up. And let's see. First thing that we're going to do is actually create the action bar. So let's kill our canvas panel. We do not need that. Delete that. And we're going to use a border for this. So I'm going to take our border here, drag it and drop it on top of our action bar, like so. And we're going to grab a horizontal box. So let's go down to panel and horizontal box, like so. And then we need a vertical box inside of our horizontal box, so. And inside of our vertical box, we're going to need a checkbox. We're going to use this to determine if we're going to allow the player to actually move our action bar around. So if we want to lock it, we're going to use this checkbox to determine that. So let's grab a checkbox and drag that into our vertical box. So a couple more things we need to add, a size box. So we're going to go down to Panel and grab a size box. We're going to plug that on top of our horizontal box, not inside the vertical, but inside the horizontal box, like so. And inside of our size box, we're going to use a uniform grid panel, which will hold all of our buttons. So let's use a uniform grid panel, drag that into our size box. And now inside of our uniform grid panel, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's our user-created widgets. And we can now populate it with our action slot that we created. So let's populate our uniform grid panel with action slots. So let's go ahead and left-click and drag that into our uniform grid panel, like so. So we get our first action slot. Actually going to select this and hit Control-C, and then on our uniform grid panel, going to paste it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more times. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buttons. So we need to, let's actually rename these so they're not all action slots. I'm just going to double click on this, name this first one action slot 0, because that's going to be its position in our uniform grid here. Going to double click on this one. Rename this one to action slot 1, double click on this one, name this action slot 2, click on this one and 3, and so forth. This is the point in this live training stream where it would be helpful where you could pause the video and do it yourself, but we're almost done. So action slot 5, a little bit more descriptive. Now we need to actually specify their position inside the uniform grid panel. So to do that, we're going to hop over to the details panel to do that. So over in the details panel, for the first one, we're going to leave it at 0. So our row 0, column 0, that's just fine. For action slot 1, however, we're going to change the column to 1. And we're also going to change the action slot to 1. This is that publicly exposed variable that we created. So we're going to do that. And action slot 2, we're going to change this to 2 and this to 2. And then we're going to change action slot 3 to 3. This is similar to what we did for the other inventory system. We set it up pretty much the same for this part. So it should be familiar. So we're going to set all of these like so. So all of our action slots should be positioned inside of our grid panel here. Our border is super huge. We're filling screens, so I'm going to actually click this drop down, desired on screen. There we go. So it looks something like that. Let's actually change the border because we don't necessarily want a white background unless you want a white background for your border of your action bar, but we're going to change ours. We're going to use that same color that we were using before, so I'm going to go to my brush color here in the details panel, click the drop down, and use that color there. So it makes it kind of pop a little bit better. For our button here, our little checkbox, kind of hard to see, but it's right there. We want to center that up actually. So to do that, we're actually going to click the vertical box, and we're going to click the vertical alignment to center. So that will drop it down into the center for us like so. And you could click this little arrow, move it to the right or move it on top, however you want to lock your action bar. I think this is good for now. The next thing that we need to do is actually specify our size of our action bar. So I'm going to go down to our size box here. We're going to override this as well. So I'm going to click the width override and height override. Again, I've just experimented with these values. You could set this to however you'd like, but we're going to set ours for the width to 500 and for the height to 125. Now, the reason that we did this, you'll see why in a moment here. So if we go down to our uniform grid panel, we're going to click vertical alignment and center that as well. That's going to give us those little bit of lips that we can use to kind of drag this around. Otherwise, it would have been hard to get in between buttons, and if you click on a button, then you're going to be dragging a button off. So we did this so we have this little bit of a lip that we can drag the action bar by. So with all of that, I think that's all set up now. Let's make sure. I think that's good. Let's actually compile and save. And let's hop over to the graph. Wrong screen. Let's hop over to the graph. So that we're on the graph tab here. We need a little bit of functionality here. Then we're going to populate our HUD, and we'll have a drag and droppable action bar. The inventory menu is probably going to have to get split off, or the inventory functionality will probably have to get split off into another video because it's pretty extensive, and we'll jump into that in another video. But this should get you started with drag and drop. So the functionality that we need to add here is similar to what we did with the action slot. So creating that, overriding those functions for the drag and drop operations. That's essentially what we need to do here. But for this one, all we need to worry about really is the drag detected and on mouse button down. So we're going to go to the functions and override, and we're going to say the on mouse button down. So let's find our mouse button down. And then let's also add one more, the on drag detected. Because the on drop is actually going to happen inside of our HUD, so our main game HUD. That's where you're going to be dropping the widget, inside the main game HUD. So we need the on drag detected still. So our on drag detected. Now for our on mouse button down, let's go ahead and do this first. So let me see for this, what we're going to do. Stretch this out just a little bit. I haven't created any variables or anything in here yet, so let's go ahead and do those. Let's go ahead and do those real quick. So I'm going to add a new variable. This variable is going to be called locked bar. Have we locked our action bar, or can we drag it around? We need to know. So we're going to create that variable. I'm going to hold Control and drag that into the graph. So inside of our on mouse button down here, I'm going to hold B to create a branch, B and left click, and this will tell us, did we lock the bar or not? If we lock the bar, then we're not going to worry about detecting drag or anything. So let's go ahead and connect that to that like so. And yes, it's locked, so all we're going to do is jump right to the return node. For the false, there's a little bit of extra work that we need to do here. So when we are dragging our action bar around, we need to know the location of our mouse, where our mouse is, because we want to position our widget relative to where our mouse is. So we need to get an offset to provide. We didn't have to do that when we created a brand new widget. That dragged widget that we created, because we were creating it and specifying it. We didn't necessarily need to do it there. We could just do it from the mouse button down. But for this, we want to have a little bit of an offset, because we could drag from the left side, from the right side, from the bottom, wherever we click and start to initiate that drag, we need to provide an offset for that. So we're going to do that here. We can do that by actually dragging off of our mouse event here before we start detecting drag. We're going to drag off of our mouse event here. And we're going to get the screen space position. So get screen space position. So it's right down there at the bottom. Get screen space position. And we're also going to drag off of our My Geometry pin here. So we're going to drag off of this. And we're going to use the absolute to local. So absolute to local. So it says absolute coordinates could be either desktop or Windows space, depending on what space the root of the widget hierarchy is in. Etc. We're going to use this to help give us an offset. So it's asking for an absolute coordinate. That is going to be the position in which we clicked. So we're going to plug that in like so. And for that return value, that's going to be our offset that we're going to use. So we're going to right click on this and promote that to a variable, which we're then going to call offset. So we're just going to offset like so. And we're going to connect that. Whoops, not off the true. Almost connected it off the true. We want to connect that off the false, actually. So let me move this stuff down just a little bit. So off the false here, going to connect that like so. And now we're going to detect if we're dragging. That's the next step. So we're going to right click, and we're going to do a detect drag if pressed. So are we dragging? So move this over just a little bit, plug this in, and plug our return value in. So, and we want to see if we're using the left mouse button. So left mouse button. And we do need to specify the pointer event, just as we did before. So we're going to drag off our mouse event here and plug that into our pointer event. My neatness just went out the window, so there's that. So our on mouse button down is done. We need to do the on dragged, and then we need to do an on dropped inside of our HUD widget blueprint, and then we will be ready to test. So our on dragged, let's stretch this out just a little bit. This is going to be really short. All we're going to do for this is right click inside the graph here, and we're going to create a drag and drop operation, just like we did before. But this time for the class, we're going to use our widget. So we're no longer dragging items, we're dragging actual widgets around, so our inventory menu or our action bar. So it's going to give us a list of different options, slightly less than our item information, because we don't need to worry about images and whether it's coming from the inventory, etc. All we need to know about is what's the default drag visual, what's the widget we're dragging, and what's the offset that we want to use. So those are all specified here. There is actually an offset that comes by default. Actually, probably didn't need to necessarily create this here, this additional one, but for the sake of it, I did it because we were creating a brand new class and just showing you how you can expose variables and include those as part of that drag and drop operation. So all we're going to do for this, we want to get a reference to ourself. Our action bar is the thing that we are dragging, and it's also going to be our visual. So all we're going to do is right click. Well, actually, let's drag off of the widget to drag here, and we'll just say get reference to self. So get a reference to ourself is the widget to drag, and it's also the default drag visual. So let's take ourself, plug that in there. And let's take our offset that we created when we did our on mouse button down. Let's take that offset and plug that in to our drop window offset here. So we're just going to left click, drag, and plug that into our drop window offset, like so. Now there's one more thing that we need to do here. When we perform the drag and drop operation, it's going to pass through the widget to drag. It's going to be the default drag visual. However, we need to tell our action bar menu that's there by default, we need to tell that action bar menu to go away. That's what we need to do. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's actually drag off the out pin here and remove from parent. So remove from parent. The target is ourselves, so remove the action bar. And then I need to actually hook this up first. That would probably help. So let's grab our executable out, plug that into our create widget here so that we get a nice flow of execution all the way through, like so. And then once we've removed our old action bar, we'll be dragging around the new action bar, and we'll have the return value that we can then use to drop in its new location. So go ahead and take our return value and plug that into the operation. Now for this, we do want to make sure that we are using the mouse down as well. So we're going to click the pivot here and say mouse down. And let's compile and save. And then I think that's all we need to do for now inside the action bar. Let's go to the HUD and create our onDrop functionality, as well as adding our action bar, because I don't think we've done that yet. And then we'll be ready to test. So let's go inside of our HUD, our main HUD widget blueprint here. Just going to double click and open that up. Yeah, see, we haven't added anything in here yet, so let's go ahead and do this. So for this, all we're going to do is go down to the user created. We do want to use our canvas panel here, so we're going to leave the canvas panel, but we're going to take our action bar, which is populated with action slots, and we're going to drag and drop that onto our canvas panel, like so. Going to zoom in just a little bit, like so. And what we need to do for this actually is make sure that we are using size to content. So I'm going to click the size to content option here. So over in the details panel for our action bar, make sure you use size to content. That will fill it out for us nice and big there. Now by default, you can place this wherever you want by default for the action bar. It really doesn't matter because we're going to allow the user to move it around. But by default, we're going to place ours here down at the bottom, something like this. And we're going to make sure that we anchor it to the bottom of the screen as well. So that based on various screen sizes, it will stay relative to this position. So there's one very important step that we need to do now. And I forget to do this myself sometimes. So we've defined that we want to use our drag and drop. We've set up all the drag and drop functionality. We've passed through what it is we're dragging, etc. When we're detecting our mouse button down, all that's fine and dandy. None of it is going to work unless you make sure that the widget that you are dropping it in is hit testable. And what we mean by hit testable, if we select our HUD, the root up here, we need to make sure that the visibility for this is set to visible so that it will receive hit tests. So if you see the tooltip there, it's kind of off screen. I don't know if I can drag my tooltip in. I guess I could minimize it. I guess you could see it as well. But the key takeaway is that we want to make sure that it is visible. So now our HUD will receive hit tests, so we can drag and drop our action bar. We need to hook up the drop functionality though, so let's go ahead and do that, and then we should be able to test. So let's go to graph, And what we're going to do for this, let's go to our onDrop. So we're going to go to the functions. I'm going to click the override. All we're worried about is the onDrop. We don't need to worry about mouse down or drag or any of that. All we're doing is onDrop. So here's our onDrop functionality. This is going to get a little bit more filled out once we start doing the item dragging. So for now, we're just going to worry about the actual action bar. So for our operation, we're going to drag off the operation here. We're going to cast to our widget drag. So are we dragging widgets around? And if we are not dragging widgets around, we'll do a cast failed, and we would cast to our item drag to see if we are dragging items around. But we're only going to worry about widget drag for now. So from our widget drag, we are going to drag off the return value here, and we're going to say we're going to get the widget to drag. So we're going to get that. We're also going to get our drop offset, so drop window offset. So go ahead and get that. And what we need to do next, let's move this over just a little bit more, we need to use that same functionality that we used to determine the offset. We need to use that here as well. So we need to drag off our pointer event, and we're going to get screen space position again. And then we're going to drag off our my geometry and get absolute to local. So absolute to local is what we want. Let's move this down just a little bit, like so. And our absolute coordinate is going to be from our mouse position, like so. Or our drop location, I should say. Now the offset, to get the offset, all we're going to do is drag off a return value and hit minus. So a vector 2D minus a vector 2D. And we're going to subtract our drop offset from it. This will give us the precise position with the offset that we want. So with all of that, what we're going to do is now drag off of our widget to drag, and we're going to say add this to the viewport. So let's drag this, connect that to that. And let's see, two more things we need to do. We need to set the position of this widget in our viewport. So we're going to drag off of our widget to drag here. Set position in viewport. So, and let's connect this to this. And it's asking for a position, and we have our position right here. So let's go ahead and plug that in. That's going to be our position. Now there's an option for remove DPI scale. If you've already calculated inverse DPI, set this to false, etc. We don't need to worry about this, so we're going to uncheck it. So we're going to uncheck it. It'll give us the precise position. Then we're going to connect our executable out here to our return node, and we're going to check this return value to let it know that it has been handled. So let's compile and save. Again, there's that note. We'll just leave it as is for now because we're going to come back to this and populate it later. So let's check our event graph, and let's see, is there anything else that we need to do before we can test this? I think we should be able to test this. So here's the moment of truth. So we've added it. Let's see. Let's just test and play. So we've added our bar. There's our bar. We don't have the ability to display our inventory or bring up our cursor yet, so I'm just going to hold Shift and F1 to give me mouse control. I should be able to left click on this and move it around now. And when I release, it now stays where I wanted it to go. Our overlay probably could have been something better than a gray on gray, but now we have the ability to move our action bar wherever we want, and it will stay there as soon as we drop. Again, we can click anywhere inside of this border, and we will get that offset as we've set up. So that's why we wanted to create the offset, why we did that little bit of extra work to kind of give us a better looking drag and drop. Otherwise, it would snap to a position while we're dragging, which we probably don't want. So there's that. I guess the last thing we can check, make sure that we can check this checkbox here. And no, we could still, we could still drag it around. Hey, 1 out of 2 isn't bad, I guess. So let's actually check why that's not working real quick. Probably something really dumb that I missed. So let's go to our action. Let's go to our action bar here. Oh, that's probably, I already know what it is. Let's go to the event graph for our action bar here. Go ahead and laugh. It's pretty funny, actually. So our action bar, let's go to the event graph. We need to actually add a clicked event for our little checkbox that we have here. So on our action bar, on the graph, let's check our checkbox here. Down in the events, add an event for on the check state. So go ahead and add this. It's going to give us a Boolean, which we've created the Boolean, we just haven't populated it. So I'm going to drag this in and connect it like so. So that will set it for us. Let's compile and save. And let's try that again. So let's play. That should lock for me. So I'm going to hit Shift F1, lock it, and I can no longer move it around. I can shoot, which I probably don't want right now, but I uncheck it and I can move it around again. So we are about an hour and 10 minutes in. Let's actually see if there's any more questions that I can get to here. So how does the newly created action bar widget know which items are where? So the question here says, how does the newly created action bar widget know which items are where, which items are inside of our our action bar? If that's what you are referring to, if we go to our action bar and we go to the designer tab, we've specified that each of our individual action slots, we've defined their position with this value here, this publicly exposed action slot variable here. So if we go back to our action slot itself, if I double click and open that up, we can specify, we actually haven't got to it here, but we could specify, oh, this is for the on drop, actually, that doesn't matter. We have specified what position it is in the action bar through this publicly exposed variable here. When we get to placing items inside of the action bar, we're going to use this value to determine what items should go inside that action bar. It'll start to make a little bit more sense when we jump into the next training stream to kind of expand upon this and continue with our inventory system. If I drag in the other finished project here, actually, I'm going to go ahead and drag that in so you can kind of see that. So let's go to our action bar. Let's see if I can find this actually. So drag and drop. So we are specifying when we haven't got into this yet, but this is the part that we stopped on here. We are going to be moving our items and moving images and things inside of our inventory. It's actually inside of our player controller, actually. Let me open that up where it's really happening. So moving items. See, it's a little bit hefty on the script work, but it'll go by quick. A lot of copying and pasting, very similar functionality. I guess we'll get to that in the next video. But to answer your question, we are going to be telling our action bar through that exposed property that we created where it should sit inside of our action bar. So that's probably what we're going to do in the next video. So I don't know if there's any more questions. About an hour and 15 minutes in. Let's see. So again, here's the finished version. So if we run around and pick up our items, we hit I. So we've got to this point. This aspect is identical to what we've done here. We're just creating our inventory menu the same way we created our action slots here. The functionality for the individual buttons is going to change slightly, but the actual inventory menu and setup is very similar to this. We'll probably do that in the next video as well. So actually, yeah, I think this is a good place to pause. We've got our action bar set up. We've created our first drag and drop functionality. With that application, you should be able to take that a little bit further and try and jump into the inventory, or if you'd like to wait to the next training stream, we'll continue inside of the inventory menu and populating the inventory menu. So let's see, there's a couple more questions. How expensive is UMG? Is it constant tick expensive? That's a bolded question. So how expensive, let's see, is it constant tick expensive? I guess depending on what is happening inside UMG, it shouldn't be too expensive, but if you have a bunch of functions that are constantly being updated, then there is some potential for overhead. I don't have precise numbers, but that would be a question that you could direct to our engineers for more specifics on that. In this case, could we include the action bar inside the player's camera as an inside a helmet character? You could probably do that. Because we've created it as an individual widget, you could, in essence, make it a 3D widget as well, which you can then use for VR purposes. So it could be a VR action bar. You could attach it to a camera if you wanted to. You could attach it actually, inside of your actual player character, inside of here, you could just add a component of the widget type. And on the viewport here, here's our player character. Here's our widget. This is getting into 3D widgets, a little bit extra credit here. But here's our widget. And if we go to the details panel, which is on the right over here, we can scroll down to the UI section. We could specify the widget class. We could specify our action bar. It's kind of big right now. We could hit E and kind of rotate it around. We can hit, we could scale it down a little bit. Let's see, draw size. Oh, no, that's not going to work. Thought that would work. This is experimental for me. I haven't actually tried this yet, but I have worked with some 3D widgets, and this is how you would do it. You would just create a widget, make it a 3D widget, and then call the widget class here. Let's see if I can move it out, move it down. I can't actually, that's not going to actually scale it in size. I guess I could do it like this. So we were experimenting with this a little bit the other day for VR purposes to try and get a VR HUD. So you could do something like this. So when you play, it would appear something like this from your perspective. You'd have to kind of tweak it, obviously, but you could totally do it. That's the long answer of it. So if there's no more questions, actually, I think this is a good place to pause, hour and a half. Again, that was your first taste of the Inventory 2.0 project. We've created our first drag and drop functionality. In the next training stream, we'll continue inside the inventory project and set up the logic for dragging items from the inventory down to the action bar. What happens when you pull an item from your inventory and drop it in the world, removing it from your inventory menu. So we'll talk about that, as well as the logic for swapping items around. So there's some things that we need to do to set that up to make sure that that's working properly. So that's going to do it for this training stream. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next training stream.